So in this section of the slide, we are going to look at the eligibility, also the requirements, and also the readiness and preparedness that you should have for you to take PMP exam. So let's move on. So the first part of it is you need to understand on the project leadership within the eligible period. So what does that mean? It is expected that before you take your PMP exam, you must have been involved in a project in whatever capacity, and also it also depends on your qualification. Say, for example, you had your qualification in master's degree. It's expected that you must have at least 36 months experience. If you have got a diploma, which is on the lower side, you're expected to have at least 60 months of experience. So it's expected that you have some project leadership experience within the eligible period, which means if it's 36 months, which is 3 years, or 60 months, which is 5 years, you're expected to have had some project leadership in that capacity. Then one of the very important eligibility item is to have these 35 hours of training, project management training. So this is very important. You normally get, if you do it through the authorized training centers or institutions, you're going to get a certificate which is going to confirm that you have attended and you have completed the required 35 hours. So make sure that you are dealing with a genuine institution to give this to you, okay? So the next one is also on the educational pathway, okay? So like I said, if you have got masters, you are normally expected to have had 36 months experience. If you have got a higher national diploma document, you're expected to have 60 months experience. Then you start the application, okay? In the application, I can tell you it will take a bit of time, but it's quite important that you appreciate what you have to do. Of course, you have to put information like your name, your institution where you obtained your qualification, and your highest qualification that you also have. You still also have to put the experience that you also had. So you put it also on your application. When it comes to the application in terms of experience, make sure that you are actually touching more on project management experience, not any generic experience. So that is very, very important. In some cases, your application might be picked for audit. So make sure that you have all the evidence that you have put in your application, so that if your application is picked maybe for audit, you are able to provide your proof, especially your certifications or certificates, especially on the academic side. So if you don't have it, you have lost it. Make sure that you are finding time to get it. Otherwise, when it's required and you don't provide it, your application might not be approved. It normally takes 2 to 3 business working days for your PMI application to be approved. Then, if we move on to readiness questions, there are certain questions you have to ask yourself before you take your PMP exam. This is exactly what I did. So the first one is, are you able to explain, okay, your key role clearly in your application, okay? Can you explain what is it that you were doing in that application? What is it were you doing in the project before you update the application? That is very, very important. It's enough evidence that you have done the project management activities. Okay, do my projects show leadership or even directing work? You should be able to show that also in your application. And one of the readiness questions is, do I have proof of training hours? Remember, we said you need 35 hours here, okay? So do you have proof that you have done 35 hours? You can enroll into one of those project management courses that can award you those 35 hours of training. And are you able to commit 6 to 10 focused study weeks? Remember what I said, for me, I gave myself 8 weeks of focused studying. So I've heard other guys saying they've done it in 2 weeks, 3 days, 5 days. I don't understand that, because taking the 35-hour training course, it's not something that you can just quickly do in a day or two. Maybe probably 3 weeks minimum. That is if you're only focused on the PMP study. You're not doing anything else. But if you're having some other projects or some other side hustles that you're running, it's most unlikely that in a week or 2 days you'll be done with this. But others, they claim to have done that, may have done it in 6 weeks, in 8 weeks. That's what I can say. So you should be able to commit yourself between 6 and 10 focus study weeks. Then also in terms of scoring, when you are doing your practice, are you also scoring consistently in the good marks? In most cases, if you are getting 80% of your practice, then I think it's fair for you to start preparing for the examination. So it's quite important that you are very familiar with these eligibility. So the process is quite very simple. You decide that you want to go for PMP. You select a training institution for you to gain your 35 hours. And then you practice in terms of questions, how you're going to tackle the exam. Then you go through the application process. If you want to understand more about this eligibility application process, I've also created a full video on the eligibility and also the application process. So you go through the application, you wait for 2 to 3 days. Assuming your application was not picked for audit, you get a response that it was approved. So once it is approved, you now need to select the date when you want to have the examination. So when you want to have the examination, you have two options. The one, you can do it online, which means you can do it from your house or from your home, or you can use the Pearson view testing or even testing center. So for myself, I decided to use the testing center because it was more convenient for me to do that than at home, where probably someone could just come into my room or there could be some noise outside and so on and so forth. So once you have chosen your option, assuming you have decided to do it online, make sure that you don't get any disturbance. And remember, your mic is going to be on. It's called proctored online examination. So you should make sure that you don't make any violations in terms of examination. So that is very, very important to consider. So in the next slide, we are now looking at what tips I should give you in terms of application for PMP examination. So when you're applying for PMP examination, you're going to have a section for description. Make sure that you're using project description that shows that you were actually involved in that role, and also you mentioned the deliverables, the approach, and also the outcomes. This is all about project management. If you don't make sure that you're including this, it will be very difficult for someone to just use your application to confirm that you did the required experience. Then you should always avoid exaggeration. You know, like any other application, whether it's PMP or it's academic or anything else, or even application for a job, don't exaggerate someone. Don't put something that you know is not true. Okay? Just mention what you have done, what you have completed, and also make sure you're putting something that you can provide the evidence. If you are not able to provide the evidence, it will be difficult, especially if your application is actually picked for audit. Then make your experience and demands non-overlapping. What do you mean by this? So your experience should not be overlapping. Say, for example, you were running a project from January to June, and now you're also running another project from April to May. Then obviously that period is overlapping. So one period can be only considered, and you might find you're short of the required hours. So always make sure that you don't have these overlapping ones. Then keep your training certificates and employment as evidence organized, just in case it's requested. You also have to make sure that you keep it organized and ready. then only submit your application when it's complete. This is very important. Don't rush to submit your application. It will be rejected. Make sure the required information, it has been completed, the required information has been submitted in the application. So this is what you should always try to avoid as errors when it comes to application for PMP. And this is the same thing that I also used when I was applying for my PMP examination.